Welcome, Ian.
Good to see you again.
Ian and I have had a quite healthy exchange over the past, I don't know, several months, half year or so. He was a very welcome and appreciated guest instructor at my Modern Minuteman cohort this past November, where he spoke about the responsibles and the resentfuls, where he helped my participants understand better what the nature of the game and the eternal war is that's being played and fought, respectively. And today we want to, we want to talk about a specific subject that goes into more detail on the competitive dynamics. Not even competitive, because competition really implies essentially a guardrailed form of struggle between people who are on some equal plane, but it's really an existential conflict often, or an ongoing war, if you want to call it that. And so that war, as I understand it from reading your article, is that between the true upper class, as you call them, which, if I understood correctly, are essentially those who inherit and steward intergenerational responsibility at the top of a given society's kind of responsibility hierarchy, if you will. And often, though not always, that may be, in fact, the royal family, or perhaps a slightly larger class than that if it includes true nobles. But really the core of it is the behavioral nobility, in the sense, the ability and the willingness to act with responsibility, not only for one's own well-being and advantage, but also for that of the whole structure that one sits at the top of, essentially through that behavioral capacity to enact responsibility. And I think this is something that everybody recognizes is sorely missing today, and is in fact one of those things that makes democracy, or liberal democracy, or however you want to call the system we still have today, it really isn't anymore even pretending very much to be that on its own terms. But what endangers it always, and what it has been decried as leading to always, even since the ancient Greeks, is a degeneration into oligarchy and ultimately essentially a mob rule, which is, there is no real responsible use of judgment and force anymore, and it is simply the passions of the moment and those who can manipulate those that rule the day. And they rule the day rather than eons, right? Because the whole temporal horizon of everybody in society, other than those who still have the ability to corral others, shrinks to the day-to-day existence. And therefore investment and, well, responsible action no longer really is possible. And in fact, I wrote an article that I published today as well called The Missing Rung. And in it, I kind of took a conversation, an interview that I watched between Uber Boyo, one of the people that you've pointed to as somebody who's exploring a lot of these things, and his interlocutor, the warrior philosopher. And in it, they spoke kind of about the phenomenon of technological colonization of our salience network, of our cognition, essentially. And they laid
Reverse singularity.
Yes, they laid out a kind of hierarchy of responses to that. The lowest totem pole being the gooner in Gen Z speak, right? Somebody who essentially just does little else than satisfy their low animal impulses in the moment, and is captured by this technological colonization essentially entirely, and is just a responsive appendage to that system. Then there's actually the trance above that. In some sense, they say they are above that because they are essentially revolting, or are revolting to some extent against a limitation that is just part of reality, and they're essentially imposing their will over and against that limitation. Of course, misdirectedly and misguidedly, but nevertheless, it is a kind of assertion of will. Although
it's a low resolution revolution.
Right, although
role as
oftentimes, of course, they themselves are little else but gooners, essentially, who are being baited into the hazard of following this ideology or this behavioral pattern. And then at the top of their hierarchy was the kind of current type of the moment, the looks maxer, which to my mind is still preposterous, but essentially it's somebody who accepts the reality that, or somebody in Gen Z or somebody kind of on the younger end who accepts this reality of technological colonization and attempts to aim high and use all of the factors of efficacy that it affords them to assert the desirability of an ideal and
to attain status in this artificial status hierarchy.
Right, and that's the problem, in fact, the attainment, the aim at the attainment of status through a means essentially of virtue signaling even, right? Like it's a very feminine...
Well, through the art, it's estrogenic,
Exactly, it's a very feminine perspective and approach. And so what I was adding to the conversation was that it feels like there's a missing rung or even a missing side of the ladder, if you will, right? Like this is just one pole, and there's a second pole, which is the masculine or the collective responsibility oriented,
organic, versus the synthetic,
right? And so essentially, what I was saying is that there's a trap that I've discovered in organizing these Modern Minutemen cohorts, because I had about 40 to 50 people come through them, and the majority of the people there, they are well-intentioned, they are potentially competent or competent at certain things, but their development is stunted because they have not been invested in by their elders or by the elder men that failed to uphold their end essentially of the intergenerational bargain, but themselves were also, of course, cut short in their development. So it's a kind of tragedy of the commons of progressively less successful transmission of intergenerational capacity and knowledge. And so what I discovered is that there is this temptation to focus your personal or individual attention on your life and your economic advancement as a response to the overwhelming pressure that you experience due to the commons that you exist within or are supposed to exist within having been destroyed so completely that there is actually no value anymore to attempt to contribute into a shared a shared normative commons, if you will. And so what I discovered is that there's always another excuse to not play the game of collective defense, to not attempt to create collective capacity, even if it's at a small level, right? Like if you only focus your energies on the professional game, on the financial game, on the status game, then you are but a perhaps less fully captured pawn in this degenerative momentum that's just carrying forward. And so my hope is, or my interest really is in making the primary choice that is available to people so starkly clear that they actually commit themselves to the game of collective action and defense of their societies and the work that is necessary to be done so that it is even possible for the society to resist the oligarchic or however many, whatever the sources are of the degeneration, and actually revitalize it or restore it. So I think where we can go from here is really, there is a game to be played in the interaction between the people who are capable of responsibility and who do have, who do want to do that, and the ones who feel like they need an enabler for that, right? Like the average people, or perhaps slightly above average people, right? Like the reason I called my program Modern Minuteman was that I perceived in history that archetype as the proximally attainable one for a larger number of people than the one that you champion, which I think is actually required to create the Modern Minutemen en masse, which is the modern knight, right? Like somebody who not only is minimally competent at kind of the means of warfighting and defense at their level, but who can actually organize others to do that, right?
Well,
And
and organize society for the sustainment of those that have
Right.
to engage in conflict in a manner which is self-sufficient,
right, right. And so
while
I
under
guess
attack at every level in every way.
right. And so to close this loop back to the starting point and the topic of today's conversation, we are in this catch-22 of there not being or not being visible the leadership that will make it possible for larger numbers to participate in the defense and restoration of our respective civilizations. And the people who do have that capacity not finding a way to reliably reach and maintain the loyalty of those people who would come to defense if they knew that they were actually fully on their side. And so I'll throw it over to you. Like, this is essentially what has happened with democracy, right? Like, that there was this coordinated, sustained attempt to separate the princes or the people who take responsibility for their people and defend their
Born
people.
into it,
Born
who are
into it.
born to the responsibility, and who are mortally accountable, meaning they could be torn out of their beds at night for getting it wrong.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I want to talk about today. So
Yeah.
where do you think we're at with respect to this dynamic in specifically the English or extended English civilization, and yeah, and how do we find that means of connecting again?
Yeah. I think the reason, just a quick caveat, the reason we're focusing on the English civilization right now is, one, because that's the one I was born and raised in, and my ancestors were for more than 1,000 years. But also because it's the one that is being set up for the complete and final destruction right now. At least first on the chopping block. France isn't far behind. The Germanic peoples aren't far behind. You know, it's all happening simultaneously. Also, the English civilizational peoples, we are spread out all over the world in the Commonwealth, right? The empire didn't end. It shifted, unfortunately, to criminalization and rebranded to the Commonwealth. So, you know, we are the last empire to be taken down. Now, Russia's returned as an empire, an imperial people, civilizational people, but they did that on the other side of 80 years of sheer brutality and collapse. And the Chinese have returned, and they've done that on the other side of 70 years of sheer brutality and collapse. So let us pray that we're not on the same path. But and we also say the English civilization because we are distinct from European civilization. We developed for more than 1,000 years, thousands of years, really, even before formalization of our civilization in the 800s through the 900s. We developed out there in the islands in direct refutation, right, to continental European moralities and ways and power structures, etc. So that's just the reason why we're focusing on the English civilization. But again, all the other civilizational peoples, the Spanish, the French, and the Germanics, and the Latins, the Italians, etc., are all under attack. To say nothing of the Slavs and Eastern Europeans, etc., which is obvious because there's a bloody war going on there for 3 years. Right. So I want to go back perhaps where we start with something you articulated. That there's a missing thing, right? What is missing, it's there, it's never gone away, it's just not visible, is the organic status hierarchies. We are still mammals. We are primate mammals. The only thing that really differentiates us is the lack of hair. I say with no hair on the top of my head, but, you know, broader than that, it's the lack of hair on our body and the fact that we're linguistic. That some of the only, and the hips and all that kind of stuff. But for all intents and purposes, we are still primates, And that means that despite all of our fancy technologies and all of our fancy, widgets and this ludicrous freaking financial system and all of that, we're still just monkeys. We're linguistic monkeys, what makes it even more dangerous, because we can use words and things created by words to hide the fact that we're still just monkeys, right? So whether we want to accept it or not, all the neuroscience that's been done over the last 100 years and really taking off in the last 40 years has demonstrated that we are very, very much like our primate cousins. Nothing's changed. And that's why so much of this research and work has been suppressed. So why do I say that? And I mean that right down to the neural level, neurochemistry, neurotransmitters, neuromodulators, right? All of that. We're very, very similar to our chimpanzee and bonobo and cousins, close cousins. Why do I say that? Well, because when we look at them, we see the organic status hierarchies, and they're not so simple. Chimp communities are very complex. They're the social structures and organization and behaviors between the various chimps and the various classes and all of that. And the chimps it's very sophisticated. And I can't remember the lady who did all the chimp studies in the 60s and 70s. Unfortunately, as she's gotten older, she's gone far left, but so be it. She did good work, right? And so I respect that. Point being is that we still have organic status hierarchies. That's what people are missing. That's what people are looking for. That's what their whole being is screaming for. What we've been given increasingly over the last 400 years since the Westphalian model was rolled out, but the attempt to bring down organic status hierarchies goes all the way back to Rome. And this is what Joseph Campbell was talking about, that Rome changed something fundamentally at the myth level, right? At the mythos level. And then the introduction of Christianity, et cetera. But point is that organic status hierarchies are still there. You can only earn that. You cannot be given a position or a place. You can't looks max. You can't trans max. You can't do any of these things. You must earn through competence, and you must earn through contributions. And the biggest contribution is your fighting in the eternal war by effectively playing the infinite game, as we discussed before. What's been given to us, so organic status hierarchies are all relational. Where am I in relation to other people in my family, in my community, in my larger organization of communities? Where do I fit in that relationally? Not financially, not economically, but if I really needed something, who could I pick, and I needed to pick up the phone or send an email, who would be able to actually provide some assistance or some guidance or open a door for me, and what level of society are they at, right? Where are they relationally in the status hierarchy, in the social status hierarchy? That's, again, where are they in relation, right? So relational. What we've been given increasingly by the merchant princes who've gone all out for over 1,000 years, really going back to the 700s, to destroy hereditary princes, what we've been given instead is an artificial status hierarchy. And that status hierarchy is transactional. What's the largest transaction you can do by reaching into your network? What's the most impactful transaction you can do? That's not relational. That's, it's socioeconomic instead of sociocultural. So, it's not based off of relationships. So I'm in an organic status hierarchy because I come from an old family or two old families. I have access to people that most people don't. I have relationships, not that I seek them out or anything, but if these people cross my path, well, because our families crossed paths numerous times over the last 1,000 years, we have a different conversation. And then we reassess, well, where are we relationally at this point? That doesn't happen, and it's not necessarily about, well, what do I need from you or what do I want from you? It's just, okay, here's a recalibration of where we are relationally to one another, and we'll just let that be. Maybe now in my life, or maybe 3 generations from now, that reconnect and recalibration might be important, because our families might cross paths again, and we might need to be, in some kind of an alliance. That doesn't happen in artificial status hierarchies.
And that's even only possible because the self-conception, the not just individual but familial identity is one
Correct.
of a continuity throughout
Correct.
time that passes on not just individual preferences but collective behaviors and norms and so on.
Correct. So if we put a word to that, Moritz, right? If we put a word to that, what is it? It's civilization. Right? What we are transmitting between one another, recalibrating constantly, and then handing forward the best we can in every way that we can, is our civilization, because the complexity of the relationships of our within, the relational nature of our civilization is reality. That is base reality. That is the organic status hierarchies in practice. Invisible, demonstrable, recognizable practice. It's very rich, it's unbelievably complex, and it's very old. And you can't buy and sell it. You can't civilization max.
Which enrages people to no end.
Correct.
Because it sets a hard limit to the forms of influence that some people would wish to exert over others.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And why? Because whatever influence they have has to be relational, and that takes work.
Yes.
And not in a single engagement of, what do you got? What do I got? What is the value of the price difference? No. Again, it's what I said. I might have talked to that person 30 years ago. I haven't talked to him since. But our families have crossed paths a couple of times, et cetera, and we've maintained some kind of a connection, or maybe my generation and in my life, we've never crossed paths, but my grandparents did, or great-grandparents did.
This reminds me of this trope that I think was fairly common in TV of decades and decades ago, but I've not really seen it anywhere anymore other than derogatorily, which is this father who says, we are the beerlings, right? We don't do that. Like that's a thing that used to have a very strong meaning, right? Like we are this family, we don't do that. It's a matter of identity. We don't do that in this
family. Yeah.
Exactly. And that I don't see it anywhere anymore. Like nobody really acts from the membership of a family that is like that.
We have infantilized all of our people. I say this to my daughter very infrequently, because when a father says something like that, it needs to be heard and it needs to be very serious. So it's not something we say all the time, but a father has, there are times when something is so outside the pale, as we say, right? So unacceptable a behavior that the father does stop, make sure that the child or whoever it is, even a brother, right? Like I'm the older brother, so the younger brother or sister or whatever, and we say, we do not do that in this family. And then it's not just a matter of the words. It's then a matter of, well, there's a price if you continue to do that in the family. You are removed from certain things, certain decisions, certain processes, certain returns, certain rewards.
I mean, even that term, beyond the pale, right? Like it's the unfenced area that is ours, right? Like it's a landed conception that like this is our land, this is who we are, where we are, and what you do when you do something that's beyond the pale is exile worthy, or would put you beyond the protection of ours.
Very good. And those things can't be monetized or bought or sold. So so what we're dealing with is we are dealing with, I keep hearing people say, powerful thinkers and geopolitical thinkers, some of which are my friends and colleagues, and I respect them immensely, but they keep articulating a new trope, and the new trope is that there is a conflict between two systems of governance. That's not true. It's not true at all. That's framing within the within the artificial completely. There isn't a conflict between two forms of governance. There's a conflict between the synthetic and the organic. There is a conflict between relational status hierarchies and purely artificial, transactional status hierarchies. That's the real conflict. And does it play out in forms of governance and societal norms, et cetera? Yes, but that's not those structures of governance. It's just like I wrote several pieces on, there is no right or left divide. The very concept and idea is arguing within a frame that is all on the left. So when they speak of the right, in this political orientation, what are they speaking of? They are actually speaking right of left, not right of center, right? And so then what does that mean? Well, then there's no true conservatism. Because conservatism, what do you conserve? Well, you're conserving organic, natural status, relational status hierarchies, and those fall outside of this artificial left-right divide. So what we are all dealing with, and what, as you articulated earlier on, the younger generations are having to source out and work out is, are we going to continue with the artificial transactional world, the artificial status hierarchies that are transactional based, and, whatever transaction max is probably a phrase we should create, right? Are we going to transaction max, or are we going to step out of the artificial status hierarchies and relational max on the other side, where there may be the need for a transaction of some form or fashion. That does happen, right? We do need transactions, but they need to be based off of things far more than, relational things versus, artificial status hierarchy, transactional things, right? So what does that mean? Well, let's say we need to do a business deal because, I need to sell some land, or I need to sell some assets but I want the right to buy them back at a future date at not some ludicrously jacked up price because the family's run into some liquidity issue, right? And so, okay, what's the relation? Well, I can reach out to somebody in the network that I know that we've got 100 years or 200 years of family history. And I can say, hey, do you have the opportunity to do this right now? I'd like to buy it back at this time, at this price, and they're going to be far more likely to do that. Why? Because 200 years ago, 300 years ago, their family had to do the same thing and we did it, right? So, and maybe I can't repay it, I can't buy it back in my generation, but 2 generations from now, my grandchild has the wherewithal, whatever hardship we've fallen on, we've recovered from as a family, as an entity, and their ancestors and my ancestor and theirs honored that agreement. Now it's probably marked to, market at that time, and it's not the same rate as, et cetera, but we can buy it back without being just, without the value being jacked, the price being jacked up so much that it's not, it's not viable and it's not real. These are things you can do relationally. You can't do so that's a transaction we needed to do, but within the relational construct.
It's embedded within
Correct.
The belonging, essentially.
Correct. And it presupposes by nature that there will be a reciprocal transaction somewhere later when necessary or needed, right? Meaning we too, at some later date, maybe not too far, or maybe several generations from now, will return the favor. Right? That doesn't happen in the artificial status hierarchies that are purely transactional.
Right.
Right? Because in that, everything's disposable and nothing has continuity.
Right. And there's this eternal tension also between the requisite investment and insurance that has to, on some level, be there for a collective or a familial or national organism, if you will, to maintain integrity, right? Like if you don't invest in anybody, nobody can actually develop into somebody who can repay that investment and perhaps more than that. But at the same time, this is also what is exploited by the feminine or the left, if you will, this wish to
Estrogenic.
yes, this wish and this need, in fact, to invest in the next generation, to invest in those, or to secure those who, perhaps through not only their own missteps, came onto hard times, or right, like that. There's always this need to lend a helping hand, but if you abuse that need, then you undermine and, in fact, destroy the incentives and the structural supports.
Yes, but what happens in a relational system is you are reduced in status. You lower yourself in a relational status hierarchy by acting in such ways to such a degree that you can actually remove yourself almost completely from that, whatever your social class is within that relational status hierarchy. You can remove yourself completely over 1, 2, 3 generations, and that happens.
Right.
That does happen. That's the other thing people need to realize, is that the there's 3 upper classes. True, when people talk about the elites, et cetera, they're really talking about 3 very distinct upper classes: the upper middle class, the lower upper class, and the truly upper class. These are all 3 very distinctly different classes. They operate and function and behave in very different ways. They're locked in all-out conflict and war. Very few families survive for very long in any one of those 3 classes. The upper middle class virtually never makes it into the lower upper class, and the lower upper class virtually never, in fact, almost never makes it into the truly upper class. But there's a big turnover in all 3 of those. Again, when people say elites, what they're really talking about is 3 different social classes, and they are very distinct. Give me one second. So you can, through the behavior you're talking about, so if I cause relational deficits, I can remove through that. I can remove myself from the truly upper class, or the lower upper class, or the upper middle class within a generation, right? Because relationally, and this is the thing I'm trying to teach to the daughters, relationally, everything is about trust. And you can't buy or sell trust, right? You cannot commodify. We try it, with all of our legal language and contracts. And, I was an investment analyst with investment banking for very large deals. Virtually my entire job was to figure out where the fraud was. And 99, and this is no exaggeration, I would look at 300 business deals usually on average a month, sometimes more. But I would average about 360 business deals a month that I would look at. Maybe 4 of them I'd actually start tearing into. 20 or so I'd set aside to revisit, and I might tear into like 4 of them. Out of all of them, the ones that I set aside, they were just the fraud, right? The abuse of trust was, I could pick it up quick, right? The other 20, I had to dig a little deeper. Where is the fraud, right? Where's the deception and the fraud? And then it's a matter of, well, how much deception or fraud? Is it intentional? Is it incidental, et cetera? And then you might get down to 4, 3 to 4. And usually I would talk to, maybe 4 companies a month about, okay, well, explain this to me, right? I might talk to the other 20 maybe 1 time, but the other 4, I might talk 2, 3 times. I might actually travel somewhere in the world and go sit down with them. And what was my job for the partners? My job was to sit down and figure out, can we trust these people? And this is no exaggeration. I've looked at thousands upon thousands upon thousands of deals and transactions and investment opportunities, not markets, but in the actual companies. And 99% of what I saw either was outright fraud, which was probably about 80. And that's a scaling of fraud, right? From just pure fraud to just portions of it was fraud. 99% of what I looked at, it had some form of fraud in it. And okay, what is that? Well, those are people who are going transactional. They're transactionally oriented people in the artificial status hierarchy. And even if the opportunity, even despite the fraud, and we could turn it around, we can say, I can't do business. I would tell the partners, yes, on the business case, minus these things, adjusting these things, this is actually a viable business opportunity. This is a good investment opportunity. Some of these are $3, $4, $5 billion, right? So most of what I looked at was from about 200 to 600 million, and then several, good number of projects up above the billions. However, I would then recommend, but we can't do business with these, I would recommend that we do not do business with these people because here's the deception, here's the deception, here's the deception, et cetera, right? So in a relational system where we're looking at a transaction like that, what are you trying to do? You're trying to earn trust. In a transactional system, you're trying to avoid any relational conversation of trust at all through these ludicrously complex, sophisticated legal agreements.
And you're trying to make the other side forget things and essentially satiate their attention with such a tantalizing opportunity, supposed opportunity, right? Like a bait essentially into hazard.
Well, absolutely true. You also, so I'm going to use one case. I'm not going to say what it is exactly, but I'm going to use one case that comes to mind. And I think the guy's just gotten out of prison 15 years later or so. Three major international law firms, two, the top 5 accounting firms were involved, et cetera, in this fraud, and several major banks, real banks, major banks. Layers and layers and layers of fraud. Something just didn't smell right in the very first conversation with this person. And so I told the partners to drag this out. We drug it out 2 years. It took everything we've sent through the attorneys, everything we sent through the big 5 accountant, KPMG and Deloitte and Touche and PwC, et cetera, all came back valid, but something just didn't seem right. Eventually, it all hinged on a Japanese bank and a certain instruments of a certain type of instrument. Again, the issuance of certain types of instrument. I won't say what it is. I met a guy at the Chinese embassy, German guy, at the Chinese embassy who just happened, his wife was good friends with the guy at that bank, the senior vice or executive vice president at that bank responsible for such things. And this guy's wife and her were good friends. So it had taken us several years to try and get in contact with this guy or figure out how to get in contact with this guy. So finally, we reached out to his executive assistant, and there was only certain things she could do, et cetera, structured. So she couldn't, tell us exactly. Give me 1 second. It's interesting. She couldn't, tell us certain things, but what she was eventually able to do, right, is she was able to talk to her boss, right? So this is hands, but she was actually able to get from him one statement, right? One statement. And again, I won't say what it is because people can work out, but what it did is that one statement invalidated the entire system and structure, meaning those instruments couldn't actually, so the instruments were valid. The certification numbers on the instruments were valid, right? And this is $7 billion, I think. 7 certain instruments. However, the manner in which the individual that we were working with, the principal on the other side we were working with, the manner in which he articulated that he had the digital certificates of et cetera was not actually how the bank functioned at the functional level. So we'd had 3 major international law firms, 2 different, both parties, party and counterparty, accounting firms, big accounting firms, all validate all of it because it was all right. It was all real. And the bank validated it. Numerous banks, right? The originating bank, because those were valid numbers, et cetera. It took us 2 years in a randomness of meeting a guy at the embassy, right, and finding out that his wife was friends with the executive assistant for this executive vice president or president or whatever he was at this bank, to find out that this one little crucial piece was that that person didn't actually have signatory authority because there's no way he could have. Right? So to your point, yes, there's the tantalizing, the lower level folks, you know, the upper middle class folks, shall we say, and anybody, well, the only people who get access to this type of stuff would be upper middle class at the lowest level. But it does tantalize, you know, the lower upper class people to, you know, oh, this is a great opportunity. Oh, we do fraud ourselves, so we'll figure out how to work around the fraud, et cetera. And so that's one way, right, to tantalize it. But the other side of it is this vast amount of documentation created by law firms and accounting firms and all of these people, banks, you know, the banks that were involved, et cetera, not the originating bank, but the two other banks, you know, party and counterparty banks, et cetera, all of which were saying, yep, this is valid, this is good, et cetera. It took me personally over a year just to get through the documents that had been created. And then, you know, that's not so much the language, but then being able to reach into systems and structures and vet and validate that, you know, this actually works that way and this works that way and this person has the authority there and that one there. And then you get halfway through it and it all changes because the guy that's actually at that firm that does this, you know, gets fired or he goes to another job or whatever. And now you got to, right? It took 2 years plus of patience just to get through the complexity of the documents. And if I hadn't been the kind of irascible, half Scottish guy that I am, you know, the bastard child, somebody would have gone for the deal. And they would have lost, I think it was $700 million in cash, because that's what was being asked for these. I think actually it's more than that, 1.3, 1.4 billion in cash, which was being asked for, you know, the utilization of these instruments.
This makes me think of this, I think, notion that in different classes there are different ambitions,
Yes.
right? And there are different
Yes.
incentives. And
Yes.
the more that you are surrounded by a specific set of incentives that are most salient to you, the most you conform yourself in behavior to those incentives over time, unless you have some other source of kind of withstanding that
Yes.
ongoing pressure,
Yes.
right? And so
Yes.
I think, as far as I can tell, at the very top, at the true upper class level, they know, not just individually from personal experience, but familially from generations of handed down knowledge, that you cannot ever get something for free.
Yes.
That everything, and that the true work and sacrifice that is required to do something properly cannot or should not even be aimed at, gotten around, if you will, right? Because if you do, you expose yourself to liability, to risk, to
attack,
to
Yeah.
all of these things. So,
Yeah.
and I think this is something that the lower than true upper class don't really understand, or when they do understand it, they resent that fact and they attempt to get around it, right? Because their means of influence are not actually behaviorally to just simply act from responsibility and therefore get the just rewards of the responsibility, but theirs are to essentially use their means of influence to shift things such that they come out on top, regardless of whether they were the productive driving force of that or not.
Yeah. So, okay. So wonderful. So that brings us to, let's explain the ambitions of, and I want to caveat one thing first though. There are incredible people in the upper middle class. We need them. We need the upper middle class. There are incredible people in the lower upper class. We need them. Right? They serve both of these serve very, very important roles in the overall structure of humanity. The tribe, you know, the tribe of tribes, et cetera. And there are extraordinary people in the truly upper class. In fact, it's virtually impossible. You have to be extraordinarily capable and extraordinary, you know, you must be a true paragon of your civilization and your people, or you don't last in the truly upper class for more than you just don't. You get wiped out. And people need to understand something. The truly upper class gets rolled out frequently. right? In all kinds of ways. So so I want to say that, right? There's good, solid people in the upper middle class. We need the upper middle class. That is the pinnacle of managerial capacity, right? We need that. We need folks in the lower upper class. This is your, these are your transactional people who really master and maximize the utilization of the upper middle class's managerial skills to conduct, complex, sophisticated, long-term transactions that we do need to keep all of this going, right? Those folks that are solid in the upper middle class and the truly upper class in the lower upper class, work very closely with the people in the truly upper class for everybody, right? To fight this eternal war on behalf of the people, right? So the people can play the infinite game and evolve and adapt and change and improve their station. The difficulty becomes one of, it is virtually impossible to go from upper middle class to lower upper class. And it's just, again, like in primates, it's because the neurophysiological requirements of being so capable at the upper middle class precludes you from the upper class or lower upper class, because it's a fundamental different neurological, physiological, psychometric wiring that's required.
And a lot of the times, the breeding patterns of people in this class or all the lower classes, they stay the same, and they are simply not attuned to the primacy or the importance of those kinds of games, essentially.
Correct.
Right? That's really the only means that a member of an upper middle class could, not himself, but perhaps his offspring, actually enter that sustainably.
Correct. So, okay, so wonderful. So what we also have to, very much what you're saying, the upper middle class itself is a broad class with numerous subclasses in it. And so you could go from the lower end of the upper middle class, let's say, I'm just using numbers, that's not really the best way to do it, but let's say you've got $10 million worth of power. You go, well, it's probably more than that now. It's probably, let's say, $200 million worth of power. The upper middle class is several $billion, right? And I don't use the numbers as the monetary numbers. I just use it as, what can you do if you had $200 million in the world versus, $2 billion or $3 billion, right? And the lower upper class goes from, right now, I think it's $3 to $5 billion to tens of billions of dollars. Now, and again, that's not or hundreds of billions actually, right? But that's not about the money you have, because there are unbelievably capable, powerful people in the upper middle class that don't even have $1 million, right? And there's truly capable people in the lower upper class that maybe only have $10, $20 million, right? So it's not so much about a monetary account. That's the artificial status arguments. Okay, so the upper middle class itself, because of the broad, unbelievably complex space they operate in and function in, and very much what you say, they do intermarry. Classes intramarry, not intermarry. Classes tend to intramarry because that maximizes their offspring's opportunities. However, also, because the three upper classes think about this before all other things, it also helps them maximize resource retention. Resources aren't, bled out from the family, from the social class, et cetera. Okay. So that's managerial class, the upper middle class. The bureaucrats, judges, all of these things. The lower upper class are transactional oriented, transactional based. This is your lower nobility in the old system, right? And what are they focused on? They are focused on very specific domains, and on the complexity of managing and overseeing all of the relations and complexities and transactions necessary for the sustainment of that domain. And that could be major corporations, investment firms, it could be countries, it could be, et cetera, et cetera. So the lower upper class is tuned broader than the upper middle class. It uses the upper middle class for high-end management, but it is still limited in certain domains, certain industries, certain, whatever it may be, right? Like the Rockefellers in oil, or the Gettys and et cetera, or Flick and the railroads, right? Carnegie and steel, Musk and, technology, really, because his company's all, Musk's advanced engineering is probably a better way of saying it with Musk, right? All of his companies are really, aspects of the same core capability. That's the lower upper class. And the lower upper class is engaging with and directly with the truly upper class because they cross paths all the time, right? And with the upper middle class, well, it's almost virtually impossible to go from the lower upper class into the upper class. Now, sometimes you can marry in because you have extraordinary capacities, but it is, in order to be highly capable in a domain or a very small number of related domains, like Elon is, right? He's the master of 5 overlapping related domains, all within the same parent domain, which is, advanced engineering. In order to, and again, the lower upper class is a broad spectrum from, let's say, again, just using numbers so people can understand, let's say 3 billion to 300 billion, right? That's a huge, huge spectrum. And it's vast in terms of everything that happens there. So it's very, very, it takes a certain type of neurological, biophysiological, and psychometric orientation to thrive in the lower upper class.
And we know that in Musk's case, for example, he had a particular certain kind of childhood that forced a certain kind of adaptation, right?
Correct.
And he moved countries and had to fend essentially for himself for a long time. So these are real kind of developmental trajectories that the true upper class is fully aware of how they have to proceed so that you produce reliably these kinds of people.
Well, and also so you can identify individuals that you need to, now they got to earn it, but you can support and promote so that they can get into the upper, this is somebody who should be in the upper middle class, or this is somebody that should be in the lower upper class. And in the very extraordinarily rare cases, this is somebody that should be in the truly upper class, right? So that's one of the things specifically the truly upper class is constantly doing if they're healthy and they're not completely under attack, which is what they are now and have been for the last 60, 80 years. And the lower upper class does it. They're constantly looking for talent to bring in. Musk was brought in. Yes, he had a unique child. This is a Gladwell's Outliers book. I don't think Musk's in there, but the articulation you just had is that yes, most of these people that get into these, the upper middle class, lower upper class, or the truly upper class, you actually have to look at the 5-year window in which they were born, where they were geographically born, who their family was connected to, and then see,
Right. And this doesn't happen in all societies, by the way. We're talking to some extent about civilizational peoples with a certain level of genetically diffused capacity, right? Because something that people that people don't really know is like in the European case, for millennia there's been the culling of essentially the criminals, right? The people who have such low impulse control and such undirected aggression that they were essentially taken off the genetic table entirely.
1% per
and
year.
so we had a pacification of the population as such, and then that also meant that through outbreeding and through the outlawing of cousin marriage, essentially, we also made everybody pretty much very much related to each other, not like incestually related to one another, but that the population at large
ancestrally
is well related to one another. And so what this also means is that you can have people who at one time in their familial line were at upper class or upper middle class, but fell economically or socioeconomically down to a lower level, but can rise again because the genetic potential is still there. So this is not an economic thing, right? This is what I currently see in the
it's
comments
a capacity
here as well.
thing.
Exactly, we're talking about
thing.
capacity.
Yes, it is a purely capacity thing. And again, there is high turnover in the UMC, upper middle class, the LUC, lower upper class, and the less of a higher turnover. But right now we're in a period where there needs to be more turnover of the truly upper class. And there's not much of the truly upper class remaining because they've been steadily under attack really since the Westphalian model and the Inglorious model was put in place, they've been destroyed. I mean, when I say destroyed, I mean, what did the Napoleonic Wars do? Look at how many noble houses were killed in the Napoleonic Wars on all sides. And then look at what World War I did. It pretty much ended it. And then World War II was just the final coup de grace. Well, as these three upper social classes start to reorient and reorganize themselves, they're set up again for a complete culling, right? A complete destruction. Here's the point. The most important point. These three classes are locked in all-out life or death war. The upper middle class, the non-responsibles portion of the upper middle class and lower upper class, which is only about 20% of them responsibles. The rest are trying, the upper middle class is trying to do away with both upper classes, the lower and the truly upper.
Because they have the delusions of being able to take over their role.
It's the master and emissary problem, right? They're the emissaries and they think, well, we're doing all the work. Why do we need the master?
Right.
Okay, well, historically, every time the master's been done away with, everything collapses into chaos and destruction and violence, right? Because it turns out the upper classes do serve very, 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 very critical roles. It's like, look at a chimpanzee pack. Look at wolf packs, right? Remove the alpha, or not even just kill the alpha, kill enough of the strong betas. And people need to think, when we think beta in animal species, in humans, this is a complete misunderstanding. Betas alphas, the betas are one step below the alphas in animal species. The betas are the ones that do the raising of the young. They do the hunting, they do the fighting. Alphas fight amongst each other, right? And other alphas of other top level groupings, and they keep the beta versus beta competition within control so that it doesn't get out of control. Betas in animal species, social animal species, do most of the heavy lifting. Well, it's the same here with the upper middle class. They're, and below the betas basically in animal species are thetas, omegas, and, sigmoids, et cetera. Well, sigmoids is separate. Anyways, point being is this: the upper middle class has an emissary problem. The resentfuls and the adoptables in the upper middle class, and the emissary problem is they believe they're doing all the work, so they don't need the alpha. They don't need the betas. They're the ones doing everything. Well, okay, what do you wind up with? Stalinist fucking Russia, Maoist fucking China, Pol Pot Cambodia. That's what happens.
French Revolution.
Invariably.
Aftermath.
French Revolution, Nazi Germany, right? This is what you wind up with when you do away with the upper classes. And look at what the Germans did, the Nazis did to purge and then threaten and bring over some of the German nobility.
Which also speaks to that the means of influence that's available to the resentfuls or those who are not truly upper class are to bait each class into a particular kind of hazard where they are shielded from the consequences of their actions sufficiently long that they fail to recognize the limits of their pattern of action.
Their power. Yes, and they forget this conflict, this tripartite conflict. And actually, to be quite honest, the tripartite conflict is what fuels and drives the civilization until it gets out of control, which happens at times.
Right.
The lower upper class uses the upper middle class's emissary problem, attempts to remove the upper classes as a weapon against the upper class. Because the lower upper class thinks, well, we can do that. We have all the money. We have all the businesses, all the corporations, all the companies. We have all the entities. Why do we need the upper class, truly upper class? What the hell do they do? What do relationships matter? We got good attorneys and we got great accountants and all the stuff I was talking about earlier, by the way.
What is all this pointless symbolism? And
why do we need a civilization, right? I can't monetize that shit, right? So, they use the upper middle class's attempt to remove the upper class to, it's like Gollum, then we be the master, right? And so the lower upper class, and then the other lower upper class is also thinking, why are we maintaining the truly upper class? That's a cost structure. That's a, and they're getting in our way because they're using all this soft power to make sure that we don't, enact this or enact that or do this or do that, we would maximize profit.
Set limits to our transactional behavior.
Right. Yeah. It set limits to our It's exactly very good. Right. And what is the truly upper class doing? Well, the truly upper class is trying to survive those two other classes constantly. Right. And one of the prime examples of that, and I'll use the British royal family, especially since it's in the news today, and to something you articulated earlier, this is not necessarily a direct heredity thing. However, it is a heredity thing, meaning you need to be born with the capacities. And then you have to have the environment around you, which is also shaped by their genes. But you also have to have the environment around you from the very earliest age to shape and guide you to be able to even understand the world of the upper middle class or the lower upper class or the truly upper class.
Simply because people forget that we are actually very different from one another along meaningful dimensions because we look alike.
Yes.
But if you wouldn't say that a beaver who even attempts to make a dam when he is in a human house out of the stuff that he can find around him, you wouldn't say that he is the same as, I don't know, a rat, even though their body types look somewhat similar, right?
Yeah. And they also build nests.
Yeah, exactly.
They build, yeah. So
very good. The animal and also human types, even though we are Homo sapiens largely all, we do not only come from and exist within different niches, we also create them.
Well, and we also have fundamentally different capacities. And that's how we have to look at the upper middle class, lower upper class, and truly upper class and actually even the middle class and the three working classes, right? I don't quite like the term working class. I mean, it's true, but it encompasses folks that can't work or don't work can't because they have mental health issues, et cetera. And I don't want to lump them all together because you've got extraordinary people in the in the lower working class and the upper working class, right? You've got extraordinary people
Oftentimes
in there.
They are, in fact, behaviorally at a low scale more virtuous because they cannot afford to be otherwise.
Correct. So here's the thing. They are constantly in struggle, the same as the truly upper class is. And it turns out that the working class and some, good portion of the middle class, but really the working class and the truly upper class are more like each other than, just think scale difference, but they are way more like each other than any of the other classes. It's astounding. And there's a great scene in the movie, A Knight's Tale. You remember that movie with the Irish actor who died?
Yes, Owen something, I think.
No. Gosh. Oh, I feel terrible. He played the Joker too in the second movie. Great actor. Unfortunately died too young. But anyways.
Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger, right? Brilliant. Love Heath Ledger. One movie I hate, but I won't say it. Everybody knows what that one is. And I think that movie actually broke him. I think that's what did it. Give me 1 second. There's a scene in there where the Black Prince, right? William IV, I think, or Edward IV, I don't remember. Anyways, the Black Prince, right? Where the Black Prince recognizes him. He knows that he's been lying, et cetera, but he's faced him and he's watched him in the joust, et cetera. And so the Black Prince says, to this commoner who was acting like a minor noble prince, the Black Prince in front of everybody says, no, we found a scroll and Why? Because the Black Prince, who is quite literally the crown prince of England, that's who it was patterned off of, recognizes nobility in this commoner, right? Exceptional nobility, and he goes out of his way to help this commoner actually become, minor nobility. But why? Because the truly upper class and the working classes are very much alike. The only difference is scale. But give me 1 second. Back to the royal family. The truly upper class, so there's a phrase, right? There's a term. And the term is re-strengthening the chins or plussing up the chin, right? Give me 1 second. Daughter's calling. So you have to plus up the chin. And that means you got to bring in blood from outside your social class, right? Give me 1 second. Okay, what did the royal family just do? Kate Middleton's what? Her Royal Highness, by the way, excuse me, but Kate Middleton's from a commoner family. But that's not a common family. Look at the Middletons, right? They're, give me 1 second. Terribly sorry, everybody.
Family duty calls.
That's my daughter. Kate Middleton's family, to what you're articulating, they have all the capacities, right? Of not just nobility, but truly upper class, royalty. That wasn't an accidental, or it was plussing up the family line. Now here's the other crazy thing. William, His Royal Highness Prince William, would be the most English king we've had in, I think, 300 years, maybe more. His son, Prince George, right, I think. But his son, the third in line to the crown, would be the most English king we've had in like 800 years, 900 years. So the Middleton family, and again, to what you're talking about, okay, well, why does the Middleton family have so much capacity? Because at different times they have married into the royal family. They have married into truly royal upper class before. And the Middleton family is a family that used to be well, that's not true. They've been upper middle class and lower upper class for 1,000 years, right? So we need to plus up the chins right now of the truly upper class. And we need to support, protect, and defend the truly upper class against this all-out conflict of the upper middle class and lower upper class that are going all in on burning forever the truly upper class to mask and hide its own sins.
Right. And I want to emphasize again for the benefit of the viewership, because I see comments in the chat that seem to betray a misunderstanding, and I think a resentful one at that, which is we're talking about the true upper class. We're not talking about people who simply currently sit atop the totem pole, if you will. We're talking about people who behaviorally, behaviorally enact responsibility, and there can always be people who stray from that path, even when they have been brought up in that sense. So we're not simply saying everybody who's above you in finances or station is your automatic batter, and you should humble yourself before them and do as they say. We're talking identify the people in those classes by their behavior who are worthy of that station.
Correct.
And cooperate with them in ways and support them and have them support you in ways that are possible.
So let's use the current thing with Prince Andrew. While he was born into the truly upper class, he's lower upper class. And he was vulnerable to the siren call of, lower upper class peoples and upper middle class peoples to articulate to him a way that he can improve his power position. That's again, to something you articulated earlier, just because you're born into a class doesn't mean you have that capacity. And it sure as hell, if you don't have that capacity demonstrated and proven, then I don't have any obligation whatsoever to respect you in that position.
This, by the way, is what was.
In fact, I have an obligation. Terribly sorry. In fact, I have an obligation to not do so. But yeah, go ahead.
And this is, by the way, what was meant both by the so-called rights of the Englishmen and the articulation of those rights of the Englishmen in the American Constitution, as in we believe all men are created equal. It does not mean that all men are the same,
are equal,
or are equal, but that they are created equal in the sense that they have, that they deserve and must defend those rights and those duties and obligations that come along with being an Englishman or being.
So this comes directly from the English Constitution. It comes directly from the Magna Carta. It comes directly from the English Bill of Rights, 1689, right? The American system comes directly from the English system. It just refined it and codified it into, all men are created equal with one respect. All men must be given, if they work for it, the right to upward mobility. to the highest level that they are capable. Not given, but every man is born, no matter what station he's born at. He is born with the right and privileges, God-given rights or privileges, whether you believe in God or not, but they are born with the innate right that no one should take from them. And anyone who tries must be crushed. But everybody is born with the right to improve their station through their own contributions.
This is essentially the enshrinement of the English people's group evolutionary strategy, as in their civilization,
Correct.
to continuously renew their vigor and capacity by affording the talent where it actually exists a path to contribution and being rewarded for that contribution, and therefore better the well-being and the capacity of the entirety of those peoples.
Yes, that's exactly right. It gets to exactly what you're saying. This is how the English civilization survived 1,000 years. We have this upward mobility capacity and nature built in to our, give me 1 second, Terry, sorry.
Yep.
We have all of this built in from the very beginning into our civilization, codified and fought over by 3 kings in a row who made sure that this was the core and genesis of the English civilization. And that's why we have what is called the common law. What does the term common mean? It means the king, the noble, all of the classes. All classes fall under the same law. And this is what His Majesty the King said today in the statement from Buckingham. His Royal Highness Prince Andrew is not shielded or protected by the station that he was born into. All men, all Englishmen are subject to the law.
I didn't see that. That's beautiful.
It's a statement from Buckingham today. And it's absolutely the case, right? And we fought this out numerous times. Every couple hundred years, and then every 400 years, we have a knockdown, drag out, bloody fight to, ensure that the upper middle class and lower upper class and those who fell from the truly upper class don't destroy the whole system that then denies the common man, the common rights and privileges to earn station through contributions.
Right.
And to ensure that, in order to ensure that the truly upper class is constantly locked in war with the lower upper class and the upper middle class to ensure that the common man has that right. That's why they are constantly under attack. And people are all talking about, well, we don't need no this, that. Okay, well, you need to take a step back and look at the last 400 years. Everything that has happened, all the enslavement, all the theft, all the abuses, all the pedophilia, all of this stuff, genital mutilations, buying and selling of humans, organ trafficking, all of this vast taking, all of it has happened in direct inverse proportion to the loss of power and the diminishment in size of the truly upper class. So how the hell is the truly upper class that's been getting decimated for centuries actually responsible? We are.
Yeah.
You know why we the people are? Because we didn't come to the defense of the truly upper class. We fell for the upper middle class and lower upper class's bullshit. Their manipulations, what the hell do most people actually know about the true upper class that wasn't given to them by the lower, image, vision, articulation, all of it by the upper middle class and lower upper class trying to destroy them.
And this has come alongside, or has come along with, the separation also of people from the land, because it is
Correct.
on the land where
Correct.
the relationships between the true upper class
Correct.
and the rest of the people
Correct.
are created and maintained.
Correct.
If you do not see somebody in power or somebody of that true upper class actually acting in your vicinity to the well-being of you and yours, you will not really feel and you will not have engendered in you any feelings of loyalty to those people. And of course, we should remind our viewership here that, in fact, the world wars, so-called world wars, decimated this class as well. It not only did it kill their young, their generation, the new generation of those times, it also disinherited them and essentially destroyed their ability to continue
to fight.
This fight.
Fight on behalf of the people. And here's another thing. What it also did is it drew the loyal peoples into those wars as well and killed them in great numbers.
Right, because
people
it didn't used to be the case that populations fought against population. It used to be that the military capable people fought against the military capable people, which used to not include
Correct. Which was all classes together, right? It's only been since World War II that the peasants are fighting peasants on behalf of, the UMC and the LUC, right? Before the TUC led. Look at World War One. Even look at Mad Jack Churchill and World War II, et cetera.
And
Right? They led their men in combat, and they died with their men.
Right. And we should connect this now, I think, to the last piece, which we haven't fully made visible yet, although you've written about today, which is this estrogenic disposition, or the estrogenic form of being and fighting, essentially, right? And this includes not only women as such, who on the whole are more estrogenic in their hormonal profile. It includes also men who are more estrogenic than their counterparts or their class members as well.
Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have higher levels of estrogen in the system. It means that they've learned deceptive mating strategies.
Right.
And so they do this deceptive conflict, this deceptive warfare.
Right.
Right. So what does the estrogenic term mean? It means those that engage in deceptive warfare, deceptive conflict to improve their mating strategy, as a mating strategy. Well, what most people don't think about, and they really need to, you can look at all kinds of animal species, look at, humans, et cetera, is that the most powerful mating strategy for the lower upper class specifically is to kill off the offspring and, to otherwise destroy the healthy breeding women, women, I don't mean it quite like, the Handmaid's Tale, but, the reproductive capacities of other classes. And not just other classes. If you look at the lower upper class, they are ruthless with one another. They are trying to destroy the other houses every freaking day of the week, every way they can. I grew up around these women. Man, they're destructive. Destructive.
And without limits, really. This is
without any restraint.
It's something that men have a very hard time understanding, that it's part of reality, and reconciling themselves with that, right? Like, because men, we generally direct our aggression against the outsiders, and we understand that our success does not, or we should understand that our success does not and cannot depend only on our own capacity. Correct. Right? And that our genetic strategy, in fact, does not only succeed by virtue of us maximally reproducing our individual genetic code, but also by making more successful the reproduction of our co-ethnics, our tribe, exactly.
So what happened, very, very good. So the way healthy male reproductive strategies work is it's the genetic reproductive capacities of the tribe. The way female estrogenic reproductive strategies work is only their own genes. Period. Now, you do get some healthy women, healthy women at different social classes who are not that way, who do, fight against their own base nature, et cetera, and realize that they need these other people, right? And they try to find ways to make room for them. And then there's unreal status hierarchy stuff in the world of women that men will never fully understand and we never participate in, et cetera, right? Give me a second. So, very good. Unfortunately, we have unhealthy males of every social status who do deceptive mating strategies by supporting the worst women's behavior in the female versus female genetic competition. And they do it intra-class and inter-class, right?
The fucker strategy.
Correct. So very much what you're articulating, healthy male and the few healthy matriarchs, their genetic strategy is to face the external enemy. The unhealthy mating strategy is to face the internal enemy, right? Even if you have to create and make that, figure out how to, right? And there's a great episode in the last season of Vikings about this, actually.
This, by the way, is also why marriage is one of the most pro-women institutions there is, which is something that eludes everybody, essentially. I mean, why has marriage survived as an institution? It is not an automatic thing. We do have investment into one another, into the coupling, but that is not universal, not in the animal
Yeah.
kingdom and not in
Yeah.
humans as well. It is
Yeah.
a institution that survives because it essentially locks the two complements of that relationship, but also all of the participants in that institution that practice it into a cooperative structure where we say,
Correct.
these are the limits within which
Yep.
our genetic competition takes place. And when you violate those limits, you are making yourself, beyond the pale, essentially. And so
Yeah.
this makes it possible for cooperation, which is required for the production of economic success and so on, to actually take place at a large enough level so that we can afford to cooperate with one another and defend the tribe and kind of do more ambitious things than just individually or familially succeeding.
It also, so completely agree with all of that. Further, it does two other things. One is it forces the requirement of the two partners, male and female, to figure out how the world of man and the world of women can collaborate at the scale of the family, but also then on the larger scaling. It also, in that, forces the two of them to learn how to conduct themselves in such a way that they can maintain and continue to expand upon trust. Meaning, so what does that mean? You borrow upon the society and the civilization's norms in order to self-restrain yourself so you don't conduct behaviors or commit yourself to behaviors that are, one, destructive to the family, two, destructive to your community, thereby lessening and weakening your defensibility, your mating strategy successes. But what is at the core of that is that you are required to work on how to, despite all the external and internal forces,
The costs, the
to
frictions.
develop trust. Correct. And so what does it do? It forces the individual, male or female, and then both, to self-restrain.
And
It's not externally forced upon you, it's self-restraint.
And you are rewarded with the opportunity to have offspring, to have a family, to have
Correct.
kids.
And to be trusted by other families that will
Right.
come to your defense because they know that, because they can see the trust that you've worked with one another.
Right.
And how you've overcome the natural, internal struggles. And they're like, that's a family worth protecting because I have as another family, I have the higher ability to trust that family because I can see how they've handled their own.
Demonstrated, it's not just
Correct.
asserted or signaled. Yes.
Correct.
And this is, in fact, exactly how we can kind of close the loop again to the upper classes, right? Like these are simply the true upper class is simply the kind of family that has succeeded at that challenge.
Correct.
The
Across
longest
a
and the
long
most.
stretch of
Yes.
time. Yes, absolutely. And when they've gotten it wrong or they've had members, they cast them out.
Right.
Right now, they have to be careful because the upper middle class, lower upper class are constantly trying to, ensnare somebody in the truly upper class, trying to besmirch them, filing frivolous lawsuits. I have actually only two truly successful friends, truly successful, that have not had at least one completely fabricated lawsuit, sexual assault or sexual abuse lawsuit by males and females, by the way. This just doesn't happen from just women. Males file these lawsuits too, right? There is an entire industry based off of, with lawyers, courts, et cetera, media personalities, papers, newspaper, there's this whole industry about besmirching the name and credibility and respect of the truly upper class. Well, actually all three class of the upper classes, right? Doesn't just happen to the truly upper class, but there's an entire industry that makes vast fortunes off blackmailing, each of these three classes with, completely fabricated lawsuits.
Right.
Which go in the press and they go in the, somebody writes a paper and it's a huge industry and it is ancient. This goes back to the pharaohs. There's writings about this at the pharaoh, the time of the pharaohs. This is ancient. So yes, if one of our family members falls, we must cast them out. no matter what our social class. But we also don't immediately go to casting them out
Right.
because there's an entire industry trying to force us to do that with the very healthy and capable ones as well.
Right. This is why laws around libel existed and were
Correct.
important. And the
Correct.
duel was an institution that maintained
Correct.
the access to remedies to those kind of insults, which
Correct.
we could bring back, but
We need to. Actually, I say this all the time. We bring back the duel a lot of, and by the way, women didn't tend to, necessarily duel, but women had to have a champion then. And then the men on their behalf
which
would duel.
then depended on them being able to actually get somebody to stand up for them, which means they would have had to been of
Relational.
benefit or value to them.
Correct.
and trusted
Relational,
them.
not transactional. You couldn't hire, you could, gunslingers, et cetera, right?
Right, right.
But
But it was risky.
gunslingers they didn't tend to live very long. And you often would have the gunslinger turn against you as well. So,
Right.
that's the mercenary problem that Machiavelli talks about. People really need to reread Machiavelli without your teacher telling you what the hell it means. Go read it yourself. It's not what people have been talking about. Machiavelli was not talking about manipulate and control. He wasn't a 48 laws of power guy, which is all about manipulation and control. What Machiavelli was saying, if you're this type of prince, you're going to have to conduct yourself in this way. And if you're this type of prince, you're going to have to conduct yourself in this type of way. And here's why.
And
This is how you're going to be
do
set
things
against.
that are going to be unpopular as well.
Correct.
But they are necessary.
Because of your nature, your rulership style, and this gets to what we're talking about, right, with these three classes. Because of your nature, the upper middle class and the lower upper class are going to come at you in these ways, and other, sometimes the other, upper class or truly upper class are going to come at you in these ways. Well, they're going to use your lower upper class and upper middle class against you in these ways. So you're going to have to conduct yourself like this.
Right.
Period. And that's from, when he was writing that was from centuries of observation, not just him, but, predecessors, et cetera. So what we need to understand is that when we talk about elites, we're really talking about three very distinct social classes. They are very unique unto themselves. They have very unique conflicts, intra relationships and conflicts. They have very, very unique inter relationships and conflicts. And it is this perpetual conflict between these three three elite classes that actually makes everything work.
Right. And ideally, and I think this is the generous reading that I've picked up from you of Trump's actions and the attempt to change the world order from the so-called rules-based international order, which really is the marketing term for the systematized raping of sovereign nations, to change it back to and forward into sovereign nations once again, which would mean that these classes are essentially forced to, on some level, actually be interested in their mutual and collective success. Because when they don't have those boundaries around them where the success of their corporation defines the success of their whole, essentially, you have constant defection from all against all, and therefore the continuous degeneration of the collective capacity and well-being, which is exactly where we have ended up now.
Correct.
And therefore the only process that reverses that is to once again make boundaries actually mean something, and to create return to the civilizational core that is at the center of our capacities to do anything really, and recommit ourselves and say an unapologetic no when somebody attempts to depart from or bait us away from it.
Correct. So loyalty. We have to be loyal. Are we loyal to the person? No. I'm loyal to the civilization. And if you are of a social class, I don't care if it's above or below me, but you are of the social class, and you yourself demonstrably are loyal to the civilization, you will have my trust. And where and when needed, if I can, you will have my assistance, my participation.
Right.
We were convinced 400 years ago that which was a process that happened 600, started 600, the messaging, the narrative crafting 600 years before, in 1054 really, is when it took off formally, We have been steadily convinced that, these are not, that our civilizations are not worthy of our loyalty. And therefore, the organic status hierarchies and those who happen at this time to be filling those status hierarchies are also not worthy of our loyalty. In that same time, we've gotten to the point where we own nothing. We are slaves, tax, wage, and debt slaves. And they are now openly buying and selling our children, males and females, by the way, which is another thing that really angers me. It isn't just girls that are sold in these sex networks. In fact, it's a little bit more boys than it is girls. We never talk about that. And that is something we need to address because it goes very, very deep into how powerful this estrogenic warfare is and how disposable boys are and males are, such that we don't even talk about that more than half of those sold into sexual slavery are male. Right? This is how deep this estrogenic warfare goes. And oh, by the way, all these things we know about, all the things that we get angry about, that is told to us by the upper middle class and the lower upper class, who are the ones investing in it and conducting in it and benefiting from it. The truly upper class, except those few who fall out of the truly upper class, do not participate in these things because they lose legitimacy immediately and they don't last very long. When I say not very long, I mean like a generation, two at most, and they're gone. Right? Now, that, again, so the true upper class does not participate in these things. They get painted with it all the time by the lower upper class and upper middle class, right? Most of the stuff that they're doing is also show to paint the picture, but they do enough of this evil shit for it to be real, right? For it to be genuine. And then they project it on the truly upper class. Why? So they can maintain this lack of loyalty from us, the people. And from the the responsibles in the upper middle class and the lower upper class, because there are responsibles there, and we do need them there, and we need all of this, right? So most of what people think they know about the upper class, they have no comprehension or idea that that is a carefully crafted psyop that goes back thousands of years. Again, the period of the pharaohs, the Sumerians, and all of them talk about it. This goes on. This upper class warfare has been going on forever, ever. And you don't even have to think about upper class. Look at it in your own damn families, people. Right? That's another thing that gets me. I'm a little riled right now, actually, coffee and etc. But everybody's people are running around. We don't need no upper class. We don't need no boss. We don't need this, right? I don't need no man, etc. You can't even hold your own damn family together. How the hell are you going to hold together millions of families?
Right.
Right? It's like 50+% divorce rate. 60% of people don't even get married now. You can't even handle a personal relationship. How the hell are you going to handle a state? And you think the institutions and structures and systems are going to do that for you? No, they're managed by people.
It's a cartoon version of what power and competition and politics
Correct.
and struggle looks like. And
Correct.
it is exactly this kind of consumer mindset, this consumer mentality that pervades the political talking spheres, really, that
Yeah.
I want to have a hand in offering the few among those who are participating in it a means of exiting, because that does not deserve your attention and your energy. If you participate in the game of political consumption, you don't matter.
Correct.
You can
Correct.
cast your vote. You have that. That's about all that you ever will do to have some nominal notion of influence on the collective.
It means nothing. Yeah, it means nothing. Let's give me 1 second. People talk about all you're doing when you're doing that is you're feeding the upper middle class and lower upper classes world.
Yeah.
However they want you to. They can just obviate that, as they've been doing. We haven't had real elections for at least 40 years in the United States at pretty much any level anywhere. And even longer than that, even back to Rome, they were buying elections back in Rome, right? We know about this. And we had Tammany a whole here. So what the hell people think that's a legit system, right? The liberal democracy is a legit system. Liberal democracy is the upper middle class and lower upper class waging war against the people and the truly upper class. That's what liberal democracy is. And then people think, well, we don't need any of them. We don't need any of those three upper classes. We'll handle it ourselves. Okay, well, you'll be Iraq within a generation, right? You'll be, one of these other third world countries within a generation. That's not hyperbole. That's not exaggeration. That is quite literal truth. And oh, by the way, that's not quite Mad Max. I mean, it is in some places sometimes, but that's what allows for the Mad Max world.
I think the message we can close this out with, because I think we've been going for a while, and I think we're at a good point we brought home, is do not take lightly the burden that is power. And and do not assume that you know what that is like, that you have what it takes to exercise it or to even assume its mantle. And be grateful for those who can and who do. And your role, and I include myself in this, your role, my role, our role as whether we are middle class or upper middle class or whatever it is to continue to make the small sacrifices in the moment of not taking the bait, of not adding to the cacophony of noise, of not doing the transaction even when we know it is eroding the collective capital that we and our ancestors have worked so very hard to accumulate and aggregate, and instead to ask for and demand and offer our support to those who will step forward to virtuously exercise leadership and power and judgment and form ties of cooperation with them that can withstand the external pressures that rely on our individual commitment and failure to abstain from the vices that make us feel compromised in our moral posture. So this is what I see or have seen around me, which I think is what made Christianity originally so attractive, is that it offered the people who did not have power, who did not have means, who did not have status, a vector of claiming and demonstrating virtue of at least doing no harm. And so if there's anything that in Christianity we should and can maintain, even though I am not a Christian, although I do have Christian friends and brothers in that sense, it is this sense of contribution to the common good that can include everybody regardless of their station, and that asks of all of us to hold out just a little longer rather than take the personal small benefit right now at the cost of the collective capacity.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with any of that. I would try to distill it down to something simpler. I'm not so smart. I paid attention. I've looked at things for a long time, but I got a horrible memory for facts and details and all this clever, sophisticated stuff, right? We have to be loyal. I'm not loyal to it, as I said. And I'm a former military guy. I'm also been a junior guy in firms and other things, right? I've built companies and all that. I'm not loyal to the person. I'm not loyal to the institution either. What I am loyal to the last moment of my life in every form or fashion is loyal to my civilization. And I'm English. I'm English civilization through and through. Born here in America, and I'm American. I'm loyal to America. I've fought in its wars. I will again if I need to, right? But what is America? America is the latest, greatest expression of the English civilization, quite literally. I am a loyal Englishman. I am loyal to my 1,000-year-old plus civilization. It is not the German civilization. It is not the Iberian civilization. It's not the, Frankish civilization. It's not the Latin civilization. It's not. I respect and honor them, but those are not my civilizations. My civilization is England and the English. And that includes the Scots and the Irish and the Cornwallians and the Australians and New Zealanders and Canada and South Africans, etc. Right? We're all part of the same English civilization. I am loyal to it fiercely. I am loyal to anybody who is equally as loyal to our civilization, whatever their station is. I don't care if they're a homeless person on the street, or it's the king, or the president. I don't care. If they are equally, demonstrably, across time, loyal to our civilization and its furtherance, its adaptation, it's a changing, it's evolution, because that has to happen. But if they are equally loyal to it, then I am equally loyal to them. And we have got to be loyal, because loyalty is at the core of relationships. Without loyalty, you don't have trust. Without loyalty, you don't conduct yourself in such a way worthy of trust.
Loyalty is
And
the
then you
essence of
don't have a relationship, right? So the transactional nature of the world that we live in is what we must reject, because there is no possibility in any form or fashion for loyalty there. None. I mean, it completely obviates it. It thinks it can replace loyalty with contract. Well, contract's only as good as your ability to enforce it, right? Whereas relationships are fundamental. My ability to enforce a relationship is based off of my loyalty and trustworthiness. And if there's some impugnment, somebody attacks that, I can demonstrate, usually, quite easily, yeah, that person's lying. That's total bullshit. Here's how. I can't do that in a transaction, in court, in legal documents, et cetera. Look at all these people get away with all this shit legally. You can't do that in a trust-based, loyalty, trust-based, relational, trust-based society. Well, that's what our civilization's about. What our civilization is not this amorphous thing. It's all the many millions upon millions upon millions of engagements that humans have had, where people have tried to make people disloyal, where people have tried to lie and confuse in this estrogenic, deceptive way to get us to not be loyal to one another. Our civilization is this repository of vast amounts of information about how we remain loyal. What do we remain loyal to? How do I remain loyal if the truly upper class has gone rotten? Well, I'm not loyal to them. I'm loyal to the civilization. What I do need to do is I do need to, work on replacing them, because we do need a truly upper class. We do need a lower upper class, and we do need an upper middle class, because anytime you get into complexity above a certain level, those things are, and again, you have them in your own families. The same structure, right? The same hierarchical structure is within ourselves individually in the identity stack, and it plays out in our families, in our personal relationships, our family relationships, community, and it scales all the way up. This isn't something that's imposed from the outside. No, this is a Mandelbrot fractal that comes from within ourselves, right? And so where's that first loyalty lie? And this is probably a good place to stop. The first loyalty I must maintain and daily earn, minute to minute, is loyalty to myself as a good Englishman. I have to control my impulses, which as I'm getting older is a lot less anyways, right? But, I have to conduct myself in such a way that at any point in the day or at the end of the day, I can rely upon and trust myself.
Yep.
Right? You start
Demonstrated
there.
capacity, demonstrated moral capacity is what fundamentally limits your ability to project certainty, to project confidence, to attain trust. Yeah.
Correct. And here's how I do it. I learned this when I was very young, and I have to thank my Wallace mother, right? Scottish Wallace mother. I got to thank her for this. Not for a lot of other things, but this and some others, right? I have had to carefully, across my entire life, ensure that I don't become transactional with myself. I'm going to do this right thing, but I'm going to do it so I can reward myself in this way. I don't conduct myself or live myself that at all. I conduct myself the best I can, and I work on it every day. I conduct myself the best I can so that I can trust myself. And why? So that others can trust me. And I can't do that transactionally, because I need to do that perpetually. And I have no idea what transaction might come at some later, you know what I mean? I have no idea when or where that will be recognized, when or where that'll be necessary, what or not compensation will come from. I have no idea.
What do you do when nobody is watching? This is
great.
This is
great.
the same pattern in your own life of you cooperating with your past self and your future self as it is in the families that you are another version or another generation of. So I think
Beautiful.
we'll end it there. I appreciate you coming on, Ian. This was a wonderful conversation. I assume we will have many more, both private and public. For the benefit of our viewership, you know where to find EM on X, on Substack, on his website, emburlingame.com. And you already are on these channels. Capablefew.com is the podcast that this is on. And I will offer as a closing thing a link that I invite you to visit. This is a little quiz that I set up so that you can take a basic, simple stock of where you're at in your life with, in terms of readiness. Like, how well are you set up to have the trust of the people and your family around you? How well do you understand what is happening locally in terms of politics or power? How well are you ready to respond to crises when they happen? So this test or this little quiz gives you a sense of that. It sends you the answers, and then you're welcome to do with that what you will. And yeah, feel free to reach out to either Yam and myself to continue to pursue these kinds of conversations. And thank you for tuning in.